Hello, my name is Beth Cox. I am a Quality Improvement Coordinator in the DBHDS Office of Clinical Quality Management. Welcome to Process Mapping for Improvement. In this video, I will review process mapping and how you can use it to improve aspects of your program or services. At the end of this video, attendees should be able to describe what a process map is and the reasons for creating one, explain the steps to create a process map for improvement purposes, and describe a swim lane diagram. First, let's start with some definitions. What is a process? It is a series of steps or actions performed to achieve a specific purpose. Your work involves many processes. Some you may realize and some you may not. A process map is a visual representation of the steps that are in a process. It describes the way things get done. There are a number of good reasons to do a process map. It can help you build a step-by-step picture of a process that you can use to analyze or communicate about with others. It can help you find areas for improvement. It can help you define or standardize a process. And it can help a group or person concentrate more intently on each individual step without getting overwhelmed by the bigger picture. Today, we will focus on using a process map to have a picture to discuss and to find areas for improvement. W. Edwards Deming, one of the founders of quality improvement, once said, "If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing." Take a few moments to pause and reflect. Are you able to describe processes that are important to your work? Let's talk about getting started with your process map. It is important to assemble a team, if possible. A team will bring more ideas and perspectives. Be sure to include people who are familiar with the problem at hand and the processes involved. Next, I recommend having a conversation and writing the following things down. What is the problem and what is the process? You need to have a clear understanding of what the problem is that you're trying to solve and of the process you are mapping and why you are mapping it. You will likely need to come back to this information throughout the process because it is not uncommon to get off track. Let's talk about some tips and tricks when it comes to process mapping for improvement. First of all, and this is very important, you need to map what is, not what you would like it to be. This helps make sure it remains a tool to learn about and improve your work. Similarly, don't try to fix the process while you are mapping it. Just describe it. Put somebody in charge of this step. People will want to jump to fixing the process, but don't let them. Put their ideas in a parking lot. Clarity is key. Throughout the exercise, you will want to help ensure that people are clear about what step you're on, what words you're using. Make sure to be clearly communicating. You will need to revisit the purpose of the map throughout the process and the start and stop points as needed. Consider doing a swim lane diagram. We'll look at one a little later. This is a good idea if there are multiple people or offices that are responsible for parts of the process. Each swim lane on the diagram represents a person or office. Finally, think about sphere of control. Some parts of the process may be out of your sphere of control, and most of them will be in your sphere of control. When it comes to identifying improvement opportunities, aspects that are outside of your control may feel like they are not improvement opportunities, but don't rule that out. Now we are going to walk through the 4 steps of process mapping. Let's start with step 1, brainstorming. We are going to brainstorm the steps in the process and list them in the order that they occur. Now that you have a clear understanding of the problem and what you are mapping, start by defining your beginning and end points. Without these, your process map may become too large and go on forever, which you definitely don't want. Process maps need to have a start and stop point. Next, you need to discuss things like the level of detail you want, and then get into the process of brainstorming the steps. Make sure you ask questions to try to really get it right, such as what really happens next in the process? Does a decision need to be made before the next step? What approvals are required before moving to the next task? This will help you have a very thorough picture of all the steps. Also, identify other people who should be involved in the process map creation or ask for their input, or perhaps to review drafts as they are prepared. Another good idea is to think about observing the process in action. This will give you real-time information about what the steps are. Let's look at an example that we are going to use throughout this video. The problem that a team has identified is that the annual planning meeting for individuals receiving services is happening too late. 50% of the meetings happen too late to finalize the plan before the end of the plan year. The process we are mapping is the process for holding the annual meeting. The group has brainstormed the following steps. Identify when the end of the plan year is and meet before that. Identify who needs to be at the meeting, do a poll and pick the best date, invite the attendees, gather all your documents, develop an agenda, and make sure the room is comfortable. These steps have been brainstormed and put in the order in which the group thinks they will occur. Now, this is just the start of the process. The second step in process mapping is to put your information into a flowchart. It is recommended to start with pen and paper first. Some people prefer to use sticky notes because they are great for creating the outline and you can move them around. You can put them up on a whiteboard so that your whole team can see them, and you can edit the flow lines as well with a dry erase marker. Work through your whole process this way. Show the actions and decisions appropriately in the order that they occur using symbols. And use standard symbols, which we will talk about in a moment. It is also very helpful if you have some add-ins that could better help you understand the process, such as data and metrics if you know them, perhaps actual time intervals, which is the amount of time it takes from one step in the process to the next. Perhaps you might want to put, if you have a decision point or a split path where there's a path if yes and a path if no, you might want to put the percent that follow the path to yes and the path to no. These types of information will help you identify bottlenecks and areas of low efficiency, which are opportunities for improvement. Let's go back to our example of holding the annual planning meeting before the end of the plan year. Here, the group has used sticky notes to write down the steps needed to hold an annual planning meeting. They've indicated which one is their start step, which is to identify the end of the plan year to ensure the meeting occurs before that. And the end step is to actually hold the meeting. Some other steps that have been identified and put on sticky notes: determine who needs to be there, pick the best date, set up the room, schedule the meeting, and so forth. Let's review some standard symbols to use when developing a process map. To begin with, an oval is used to show the start and stop points. A box or a rectangle is used to show a task or activity that you do as part of the process. A diamond shows points in the process where there is a yes or no question or a decision is required. And at that step, you would take one pathway or another. A circle with a letter in it identifies a break in the map that is continued somewhere else, either on the same page or another page. Arrows should be used to indicate the direction, with the arrowhead pointing at the next step. You can also use color coding to make it easier for the reader to decipher your process map. And finally, think about including a legend or key to explain your symbols and colors. So here we are back at our example, and we've taken our brainstorm list and our sticky notes, and we are putting it into a formal process map using the standard symbols. So in this map, you can see the symbols are included at the bottom of this page. And these are just to show a key for what each symbol means. You can see the beginning of our process starts with identifying the end of the plan year to ensure the meeting occurs prior to that. Then we're going to determine who needs to be there. We're going to send a poll with some date options. And if somebody cannot use a computer for whatever reason, we will call them to assess what dates are best for them. Then we're going to pick the best date from the poll or from calling people. We're then going to schedule the meeting and invite the participants, create an agenda, gather the needed documents, set up the room so people are comfortable, and hold the meeting. Here, we've also taken some time to add some data to our map to give us a little more information. Because this process is time sensitive, we need to complete this process before the end of the plan year. So we want to know how long it's currently taking to complete each step. So you can see we've added those in purple here. The first step from identifying the end of the plan year to sending the poll takes a week. The next step from sending the poll to picking the best date is taking 3 weeks currently. And then the next step of scheduling the meeting and inviting people is taking 2 weeks. And the rest of the steps combined are taking another week. So we've also indicated the total here is 7 weeks to complete this process. So now we are at step 3 in our process map. We are going to challenge our flowchart. We want to work step to step, asking if we have correctly represented the sequence of actions and decisions in the process. At this step, you really want to consider involving all staff who have a role in the process and, if applicable, consumers and other key stakeholders. You really want to make sure you have it right. So for our example, what we're going to do at this step is invite at least 2 people who are familiar with the process who have not been part of our process mapping to look at our process map and see if there's anything we missed or that we got wrong. And in fact, they did have a few observations for us. They first noted that sometimes people may pick the best date and you may schedule the meeting, but somebody becomes not available and that person needs to be there. So we added that step into our process map, that if that person is not available, we need to go back to the step of picking the best date. They also observed that sometimes reserving the meeting room is difficult because it's in high demand and there are very few meeting rooms. So they advised to add a step to reserve the meeting room as soon as possible. These extra steps increased the total time from 7 weeks to 8 weeks. So here we are at step 4, the final step of our process mapping steps, using it to inform your quality improvement project. So Questions you could ask to identify areas of improvement are listed on this slide. Is any work getting duplicated? Are there any unnecessary or overcomplicated steps that perhaps you could simplify or eliminate? Should other steps be involved? Are you missing something? Are the right people doing the right jobs in this process? Perhaps there are too many people involved and it could be simplified. Are there overlaps where several people or teams do the same task or activity? Are there activities that add no value? Do the metrics tell you where a system failure is occurring? Or are you missing any key metrics? In our example, the team has gotten together and asked questions of our process map. And they are curious if perhaps we can shorten the 3 weeks of time that it takes to pick the best date from the polling step. They also wonder if we could shorten the time from picking the date to scheduling the meeting. Those together currently take 5 weeks. We also wonder if we are actually accounting for the amount of time all of this takes, which is 8 weeks. So perhaps if we cannot shorten these steps above, maybe we need to back up the beginning of our process to account for the fact that it takes so long. This is an example of a swim lane diagram. It is a map of an enrollment process for a home visiting program. This was part of an improvement project where they were trying to increase the number of families enrolled in the program from 10 per month to 15 per month. You don't have to get lost in the details. I just want you to understand that each lane represents a person or entity that has a role in the process. We have the family, a hospital nurse, a family assessment worker, a program supervisor, and a family support worker. Each one of these people have a step in the process, so their steps go in their lanes, and then the arrows are placed appropriately. For this particular example, they also were able to add some data to a lot of the steps. One area I want to point out to you is once the family has the baby at the hospital, the next step is whether a nurse is available, yes or no. If the nurse is available, the process continues. But if a nurse is not available, that family is basically lost to follow up for this program or process. When they looked at how often this was happening, about half of the families were lost at this step in the process. So this was quickly identified as a possible improvement opportunity. This is a very relevant quote from Dr. Myron Travis. You don't learn to process map, you process map to learn. On this slide, I'm just showing you a few process maps for a common everyday occurrence of teeth brushing. There are more than 19 million results for toothbrushing process when you search this phrase on Google. You can see how different some of these processes are from each other. On the left-hand side, you see a simple list of steps in boxes with some small icons of each step. In the middle, it says how to brush your teeth. And this is a more graphics-driven process map of looking more at the pictures than at the words. And on the right-hand side, you even have one about how to brush your dog's teeth. And this is also driven by pictures. So there are really very different ways to do process maps. This is an example of a process map that is about setting up a behavioral health appointment. It begins with the patient being roomed for the appointment and then doing a screening, the provider reviewing the screening, and then several decision points of whether a behavioral health issue is detected, whether there is a behavioral health provider on site, and then if there is a warm handoff happens and they have a behavioral health appointment. They also have, if there is no behavioral health provider on site, they have additional steps that also result in a behavioral health appointment. Now that we've gone through all the steps and reviewed some tips and tricks, it is your turn. I recommend that you pause this video and make a map for yourself. Use something from your everyday life. There's just some examples here of problems that may be problems for you. And you could do a process map related to that and identify some improvement opportunities. The ones listed here are grocery shopping, meal planning, getting ready for bed or sleep, going to work, planning a meeting or event, and planning your schedule for the week in order to go to the gym or do something else that you like. Hopefully you made a process map for yourself. How did it go? What process did you map? And what did you learn? Did you have any aha moments where you had some important realization? Did you get any ideas about what to improve? Now, your next step is to think about, for your work, what needs to be improved that involves a process. After reviewing this video, I recommend that you try using a process map to identify improvement opportunities. It may be even a fun thing to do with your team. Finally, I want to share some resources for creating process maps. We talked about using paper and pen or markers and sticky notes. These are very handy available tools that you can use to create a process map. You can also use shapes and smart art in PowerPoint or Word to create process maps. Another good resource is the American Society for Quality. They have a whole page about how to do flowcharts, which includes an Excel template. I want to thank you for watching this video and wish you the best of luck in your process map journey.